USC, we go to Los Angeles to continue on our deep dives here. Joe, not the season I think that the Trojans were looking for last year, but I got to give them this. I know that we were on them and we talked about them a lot a season ago, but there were a lot of positives I think that you could have taken away from last season. Now going into the second year in the Big Ten for USC, how do you see this 2025 season with Lincoln playing out in the Big Ten?
So like the whole dynamic with their success last year and then now what to expect from them coming into this year, I was not high on USC at the beginning of last season at all. I was a little cautious after they played against LSU in the way that they did when they won, but it didn't feel right. I kind of just ate it because USC fans were taking a victory lap, and I will always admit when at the time I am wrong. I will not double down on those situations. But I felt like last year, the end result was exactly what we thought was going to happen at the beginning of the year, where they got out physical. They didn't really have the defensive line to go toe-to-toe with teams like Minnesota, of all teams, that they couldn't beat. Yeah. They didn't have the quarterback play. I didn't think that Miller Moss was as good as everyone was hyping up to be, and he started to slow down and really make mistakes as the season went on. And I think with last year coming into this year, nationally, the expectations are incredibly low. But I feel like we should actually have higher expectations and we should have higher hopes, and that this will be a much better year than last year. I wouldn't be shocked, Blake, if we're not talking about USC as one of the Big Ten teams that's knocking on the door to the playoff at the end of the year. Now, there's
I agree.
There's a bunch of variables that we're going to work through here in a second, but I look at their defensive core. They have a really underrated defensive line, and they have one of the best safeties in the country that nobody's talking about in Kamari Ramsey, who I am all in on. He's going to be a first-round pick. He is a phenomenal safety to me. They have a defense that they have not had under Lincoln Riley, and I think that is the driving force for them to shock a lot of people.
I'll get to defense in a moment, but they certainly got better last year than any level of form of when Lincoln had Alex Grinch with him. I don't think that they played harder. They weren't making the plays necessarily, but you could tell, like the Penn State game. Joe, to be honest with you, the Michigan game. Like, even in a loss, in both of those being losses, for the first time, maybe in the last couple of years defensively, I saw max effort. And, Joe, I will back a team for whatever it's worth. So what? They're not making the play. At least I know they're bought in. They're bought in on Lynn. They're bought in on everything that's going on there. They just weren't making the plays. Now, offensively, Joe, that's where I actually – look at them and say, yeah, they might not be bad. Now, the quarterback situation with Jaden, the quarterback situation, what happens there, I don't know. Does Longstreet find a way into that starting lineup? I don't know. We're just going to act as if, look, that Lincoln had one bad quarterback, and I say bad. I don't think Miller Moss was bad necessarily. I think he's a first-time starting quarterback.
He wasn't good.
I didn't say he was good. I don't think he was bad. I think there were other things that were going on. For example, I went back today and looked at that Michigan game. In 37 dropbacks, he got hit 20 of them. 20. Like, there were certain situations that I don't think that necessarily a first-time starting quarterback was given grace on. There was so much pressure on USC because of what happened the year before with Caleb Williams and losing, that a lot was put on the kid's shoulders. Regardless of that, Joe, their wide receiver core is really underrated. You bring back Mekhi Lemon, you bring back Jacoby Lane, which, by the way, Jacoby Lane had 12 receiving touchdowns a season ago. 12. Like, they did some really good things down the stretch. You bring back a tight end who, again, in Lake McCree, I don't think gets the pub that he deserves. This dude will be on the end line of scrimmage. I think he's a really good blocker. He did some really good things in the 24 catches that he had, but they're also bringing in some other pieces offensively that I got to be honest with you, I think were hits under the radar. Let me give an example. You bring in Wayman Jordan. Did you see this Wayman Jordan film? The Hutchinson Community College running back. Holy shit. I mean, like, I don't know if this is going to translate from community college or JUCO to the Big Ten. I don't know. This kid's electric. Like, this kid can play. Like, there was who was the safety that was in community college committed to Miami? I forget his name. But he's, like, burning him to the outside. It's not as if, like, when you look at JUCO, it's not as if he's going up against all scrubs. A lot of these kids getting recruited, going to JUCO, then going somewhere else. They did get some underrated pieces. Can Lincoln figure this shit out? Now, physically up front, Joe, they got pushed around in the Big Ten a year ago. That's where I worry about with them. But offensively, I don't know if they don't have some really damn good pieces that they can build off of.
And I'd also add in there Eli Sanders, who they brought in from New Mexico. He was 5th in the country last year in yards per carry with 7.2. So this is a lot of juice, despite them losing Quentin Joyner and Woody Marks, who left in the draft, and Quentin Joyner went to Texas Tech. I think the big conversation point for them offensively, it does revolve aggressively around Jaden Maeba, who was really productive at UNLV. He comes into USC, not really talked about because Miller Moss was starting, and then he finishes strong 3-1. But you got to go back and watch the tape on those final games because there was so much chaos, a lot of mistakes, a lot of really, really bad throws. If there's a coach that is going to get him right, it is going to be Lincoln Riley.
Mm-hmm.
But Maeva has to play better in order for this team to reach the accomplishments that we're projecting here. It helps a lot that you're bringing back key offensive linemen like Elijah Page, and you just mentioned Lane and Lemon, who are two of the better receivers in the country, could potentially be first-round picks in the upcoming draft. You have the weapons for Maeva to turn to and to rely on, but you got to like reel them in. You got to reel in the chaos. If that happens, this team does end up winning 9 football games. But if Maeva turns the ball over as much as he did against Notre Dame and Texas A&M and all those spots, this team could go through another bumpy season. That was what I felt like, and this is where you and I disagree. I felt like they left a lot on the bone because they didn't have a quarterback who was physically gifted. I said this, and I got so much pushback from USC fans that I said that Miller Moss was the worst quarterback that Lincoln Riley has ever had. And that's true. I'm not saying that he's a shit quarterback and he's bad. He could do some good things in Louisville this year.
He had 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick before Miller Moss.
Right, and all of those guys, Kyler Murray, elite small athlete, Caleb Williams, elite athlete. Baker Mayfield wasn't as good of an athlete, but had
Jalen Hurts,
a very aggressive arm. Jalen Hurts, elite athlete. Maeva is back into those molds of these athletic guys that he's tapped into. So I have hopes that Maeva can play better, but everything I'm just like, if you had asked me what will cause this thing to fall apart again, it's going to be the performance of Jaden Maeva.
I don't disagree with that. There were a lot. I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying I'm not going to overreact to a bad year at quarterback when this dude's had some special seasons there. Like, if we're just being blunt, before Kyler Murray, okay, let's look at the 2 quarterbacks that he did bring in. Baker Mayfield was a walk-on. He was a walk-on. So it's not as if that, like, hey, this kid just, like, Baker Mayfield was a former 5-star kid that came in there and started running shit. Jalen Hurts got benched. Like, Hurts was a lot more experienced and a lot more talented before going in there. But he also got benched. And a lot of people didn't know how he was going to react to that. I'm just not going to overreact yet to bad quarterback play. Now, to your point, what happens when you don't have first overall pick talent? What happens when you don't have a guy that's led the Eagles to 2 Super Bowl runs and won one of them? Like, I do think that your point is valid here. The point that I would make here to some extent that I want to throw out, and it's not even on Jaden Maeva's shoulders necessarily. Joe, down the stretch, they got absolutely torched in their secondary. They were playing in some massive shootout type situations. Joe, their secondary a year ago was 98th in the country in passing yards allowed. They got better under Alex Grinch. One area that they did not get better in, I mean, they did statistically, but not by much. Joe, they got absolutely hammered through the air in a conference who, by the way, does not throw the ball like that. I mean, they got punked. I'm not trying to be rude, but look at the Big Ten and look at the passing statistics in reference to passing attempts versus the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, the big of the Power Four conferences. The teams in the Big Ten throw the ball from an attempt level the least. They got punked in the secondary. I think that they'll be better there. I do think that there's a lot on the shoulders that they got in these shootouts in situations where I'm like, look, man, you're asking a kid for a first time in the Big Ten to lead you to something when your defense can't make stops. They got to be better defensively to help this offense. Joe, the biggest thing when we talk about these breakdowns, you know what I feel like USC has just not had? Complementary football. Complementary football. I brought up the part of Miller Moss getting hit 20 times and 37 dropbacks. 20 times? Like, you're not complimenting him. I think of the Notre Dame situation. Now, Maiava threw too many interceptions, threw the pick sixes, too many bad situations. Why was he put in those situations? Why is he put in those situations where he's got to go down in a 4-minute drive and score? I mean, I get that it was a lot of chaos, but Joe, when you look at them defensively a year ago, they were 77th in the country in total defense. They were 98th in passing yards allowed. I mean, it did get better, but not to the level of complimentary where you got to be a team that's going to win 9 games. I mean, I feel like because of Lincoln, we want to assume, and I understand, listen, I'm not trying to defend the kid. There were bad situations. I agree with you. But let's not act like that at the end of the day that they did not do some very bad things defensively too, because they did.
I slightly pushed back on the Maiava comment that you threw in there. A lot of his issues were self-inflicted.
Fair.
A lot of his mistakes were self-inflicted. But this is where the big step is taken is year 2 with your new defensive coordinator. And I've spoken extremely highly of D'Anton Lynn, and I've said a number of times.
He loves him, by the way.
But I really believe, I believe that, and I've said this so many times, that he is a top 5 defensive coordinator in the sport. For him to have that much of an improvement from year 1 or into year 1 after how bad they were under Alex Grinch was notable, but didn't get a lot of recognition. There is a chance now for Lynn here to continue to build this, and for all these defensive pieces that they're bringing back, for them to take a nice leap forward. I think it is totally plausible for them to be in that realm of 9 wins. Can I read off their schedule so we can kind of take a look?
Yes.
All right, they start with a new FBS team, CFB 26 favorite, Missouri State. They play Georgia Southern. They go to Purdue versus Michigan State, at Illinois, bye week. Wait, am I reading the right one? Yeah. Versus Michigan, at Notre Dame, bye week again, at Nebraska, versus Northwestern, versus Iowa, at Oregon, versus UCLA. I think that the clear losses for me on this, they don't travel well to Notre Dame. They typically just don't. They don't travel well to Indiana. And I don't think that they're beating Oregon at Oregon. That gives them a chance here if they can beat teams like Illinois, Nebraska, and beat Michigan at home.
Well, they got to go to Champaign. I mean, they got Michigan coming in. Listen, there are 8 wins on this schedule. Here's the thing. But they're talented enough to have 8 wins minimum. The question of what you're asking here is, can they upset Oregon? We don't think that. I don't think going to Nebraska actually benefits them. I mean, Joe, they're going to Notre Dame. They're flying home. Then they're going to Nebraska. Now, they do have a bye week in the middle of that, and I understand that. But in the month of, I say October, but in the 4-week stretch of games that they have, they are at Illinois, Michigan at home, at Notre Dame, at Nebraska. Joe, that's the crux because that's their crux of their season. Like, forget the Oregon, forget everything else in that schedule. Brother, you go on the road 3 out of 4 weeks. You got some bye weeks paired in there. You got the one after Illinois. You got the one after Notre Dame. So it does benefit you to some extent. But, Joe, that in and of itself, if they could upset Illinois and then get Michigan at home, God forbid they upset Michigan, I don't think you and I believe that they're going to beat Notre Dame and Oregon. But the Nebraska game for me on November the 1st is where I kind of sit here and I'm like, Joe, that place is goofy as hell. I just came back from Nebraska. That bitch is goofy as hell. They got strip clubs, McDonald's, Burger Kings, and a church is when I saw Lincoln, Nebraska. There ain't much to do in Lincoln. Shit gets weird. I'm telling you. I don't know. They do have some wins in here that I feel like that they're just going to beat. UCLA, Northwestern, Purdue. They can get to 8 wins. Joe, if that's their floor, you could be in a situation, stay with me, that they're 7-2 going into the Oregon week. And if they win, Joe, we got to have a conversation. Is Lincoln and them back in the playoff? They are talented enough to get there. But I got to say this. Joe, what's the overall crux? Defense travels. They did not get to the quarterback worth a damn last year at all. They got to find a way to do that. And if they can, maybe they can get to 9 wins. I don't think it's as bad as what it was a season ago for USC.
Yeah, my final thought with this, the big benefit with this upcoming schedule and some of the things that we're talking about we think are going to be better on this roster, their road games are Purdue, Illinois, Notre Dame, Nebraska, and Oregon. I see 2 truly difficult road situations and a good team that you have to play on the road in Illinois. This is 9-3 is completely accomplishable. And what's happening with that final, those final 2 weeks and whatever happens in that Oregon game could be a deciding factor for if they're knocking on the door of the playoff.
Really could be. It's going to be an interesting season. Can they rebuild? Look, can a guy like Jakeem Stewart, the 5-star, go in there and provide them some pass rush will be crux for them. They didn't have a guy over 4 sacks last year.